3 years ago, I was sitting at a dinner table with four people I barely knew. Someone had just poured wine, plates still warm, phones face down on the table. And then the conversation turned. Money. It always does, eventually. One guy across from me pulled out his phone, showed a chart, just casually, like it was a weather app. Green lines, up and to the right. Someone else started talking about a rental property. Another one mentioned letting compounding do the work. I remember nodding, slowly, fork in my hand, not eating anymore, just nodding. You ever do that thing where you pretend you're following the conversation, but your brain is somewhere else entirely? I was staring at the numbers on that phone, trying to do the math in my head. How far behind am I? Because that's the part nobody says out loud at a dinner table. Everyone sounds calm, confident, but inside your head something else is happening. You start replaying your own timeline. The job changes, the years you didn't save anything, the random investments that went nowhere. I remember going home that night, lying in bed, looking at the ceiling, not scrolling, not sleeping, just doing rough math in the dark. If I save more, if the market does okay, if nothing goes wrong, how long would it actually take? Because the truth is, I don't think we talk honestly about how wealth actually grows. People throw around phrases. Compounding, long-term, just invest consistently. Fine. But what that actually feels like over time, that part is rarely explained. And if you misunderstand that timeline, you might walk away from the process right before it finally starts working. Let me say something that probably should have been said earlier. You're not lazy. You're not bad with money. And no, you didn't miss some secret class everyone else took. That dinner table feeling, I've seen it 100 times. Friends, clients, coworkers. Someone mentions investing, and the room gets quiet in a strange way. People start shifting in their chairs. You look down at your phone, pretend to check something, because the story floating around out there is brutal. By 30, you should be investing aggressively. By 40, you should have multiple streams of income. By 50, your money should be working harder than you are. Sounds impressive. Also, mostly nonsense. I've worked around portfolios and financial plans for about 10 years now. And I can tell you something that doesn't show up in motivational posts. Most people start late. Most people feel behind. Most people spend years thinking they missed it. They didn't. What actually happens is simpler. People misunderstand the timeline. They think wealth grows steadily, smoothly, like a staircase. But the real pattern doesn't look like that at all. It stalls. It crawls. For a long time, it looks like nothing is happening. And that's the part that messes with your head. Because when progress looks invisible, people assume the system is broken, so they stop. Right there, usually right before the machine was about to start doing something interesting. There's a sentence people repeat in finance like it's a law of nature. Wealth grows slowly and steadily over time. Technically, that's not wrong. Practically, it's misleading, because that sentence makes people imagine a straight line. You put money in, it grows a little. Next year, it grows a little more. Step, 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 nice and predictable. Real portfolios don't look like that. I've stared at enough account histories to know years go by where the balance barely moves. You're adding money every month. But the returns? Small. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes negative. You check the account. Lean back in your chair. Tap the desk with your finger. Did I just spend 5 years doing almost nothing? That thought shows up earlier than people admit. Usually around year 6. Sometimes year 7. And that's when people do something strange. They walk away. They sell. They redirect the money to something that feels more immediate. A house renovation, a new car, a business idea that might scale. I might be wrong about this, but I don't think the real problem is discipline. The problem is expectation. People believe wealth should grow linearly, but compounding isn't linear. It's awkward. Uneven. Long stretches of quiet, followed by sudden jumps that almost feel unfair. You could spend years pushing the snowball uphill. Nothing dramatic happening. Then one day the slope changes, and the same snowball that barely moved for a decade starts rolling on its own. Most people quit before they see that slope, not because they're irresponsible, because nobody told them the shape of the curve. Let me show you something I wish someone had shown me earlier. Not a hack, not a trick, just the mechanics. Picture a simple investment account. Money goes in every month, same amount, nothing fancy. For the first few years, the balance is small, which means something important happens. The returns don't matter yet. Not really. You might earn a few $100s from the market in a year, maybe a little more, but you personally added thousands. So the growth still feels like your effort, not the market's. It's like pushing a stalled car. Both hands on the trunk, leaning forward, shoes sliding on the pavement. You're doing all the work. The engine isn't helping much yet. That stage lasts longer than people expect. Much longer. 7 years can pass like this. Sometimes 8. And the dangerous thought starts creeping in. Maybe this whole thing doesn't actually work. I've heard that sentence in real conversations, more than once, but the system hasn't failed. The scale just hasn't changed yet. Because once the balance gets big enough, the math quietly flips. Now the market isn't adding a few hundred. It's adding thousands. Some years it adds more than your entire annual contribution. You open the account, refresh the page, stare at the numbers a little longer than usual. You didn't do anything different that month. Same job, same contribution. But suddenly the portfolio moved more than your paycheck did. That moment feels strange the first time it happens. Almost suspicious. I remember a client once calling me after a market rally. He kept refreshing the account. Again. Then he said something I still remember. Did I accidentally deposit money? He hadn't. That was the first time the system had started doing the work. And this is where people misunderstand compounding. They think the magic happens gradually. But most of the time, it doesn't. It happens late. After years of looking boring. After years of looking almost disappointing. Then the slope of the curve changes. Not a little, a lot. And once it changes, the same process that felt slow for years suddenly looks powerful. Nothing new was added. No special strategy. Just time. I'm thinking about a guy named Daniel. Not a millionaire. Not some investing genius. Just an engineer, quiet type. We met after a workshop I did years ago. He waited until most people left the room. You know that posture people have when they're about to ask a question they've been carrying around for a while? Hands in pockets, leaning slightly forward. He told me he'd been investing for years. Nothing dramatic, just automatic deposits. Same index fund every month. And he looked confused. Not excited, confused. He pulled out his phone, opened the account, turned the screen toward me. Something strange happened this year. That's what he said. He started explaining. For almost a decade, the account barely impressed him. He kept contributing. But the growth? Slow. Quiet. Some years the balance even dropped. So he stopped checking it regularly. Just let the automatic transfers run. Then one year he looked again, and the number was suddenly different. Much higher than he expected. He scrolled through the yearly history. Back again, trying to figure out what changed. Nothing had. Same job, same contributions, but the account had jumped. That's when the math finally becomes visible. Not when you start. Much later, after enough years pass that the earlier deposits have had time to multiply. I remember him staring at the screen, almost squinting, like the number might disappear if he blinked. He asked me a strange question. Did I do this too slowly? I shook my head. No, actually, this is exactly how it's supposed to look. Slow, quiet, then suddenly obvious. If you sit across from me and ask what to do first, I usually pause for a second. Not because the answer is complicated. Because most people are trying to do too many things at once. Open 3 accounts, buy 5 different funds, read 20 articles about optimal portfolios. None of that helps if the order's wrong. Sequence matters more than volume. First thing I usually look at is leaks, not investments. Leaks, high-interest debt, credit cards quietly compounding the wrong way. You'd be surprised how many people are trying to invest while paying 20% interest somewhere else. That's like filling a bucket with a hole in the bottom. So the first move is boring. Plug the holes. Get rid of the expensive debt. Not because debt is evil, because interest working against you is brutal. Once that pressure is gone, something interesting happens. Breathing room. You don't feel it emotionally at first, but your numbers start behaving differently. Next comes a buffer, not a giant pile of money. Just enough that a broken car or a random medical bill doesn't force you to liquidate investments at the worst moment. I've seen that mistake too many times. People invest for years, then a small emergency pulls the money right back out. So, step 1, stop the financial bleeding. Step 2, build a small cushion. Only after that do I care about the investing part. Automate the contribution. Pick something broad. A simple index fund usually does the job. Nothing flashy. And here's the uncomfortable part. Once the system is running, you mostly leave it alone. That's it. No constant tweaking. No chasing the next opportunity. Just the same quiet deposits. Month after month. It sounds unimpressive. But that's usually the process behind the accounts that eventually surprise people. One thing people get wrong about money, they think progress is measured in decades. Like nothing meaningful can happen unless you wait half a lifetime. I don't think that's true. Not exactly. I've watched accounts change direction much faster than people expect. Not because the market suddenly became generous. Because the structure changed. Someone stops carrying high-interest debt, automates contributions, lets the account sit long enough to build momentum. Then a strange thing happens. You open the account one morning, and the number moved more than it usually does. Not dramatically, just enough to make you pause. You lean closer to the screen. Refresh. Again. You're trying to see if it was a mistake. Sometimes the difference is a few thousand. Sometimes more. I might be wrong, but I think that moment is when people finally understand compounding. Not when they read about it. When they see it. And here's the strange part. It doesn't take 40 years to reach that moment, but it does take consistency. Years where nothing looks impressive. Years where you keep depositing money even when the progress feels invisible. Because when the slope finally changes, those earlier years compress together, and suddenly it feels like the account woke up. The part that ruins people usually isn't math. It's the silence. Years where nothing exciting happens. You log into the account, look at the balance, close the tab. You tell yourself you'll check again next month. Then maybe 3 months pass. Then a year. Because something uncomfortable starts happening in your head. You start comparing. Friends buying houses, someone talking about crypto gains, another person bragging about a stock that tripled. And suddenly your slow, boring system looks stupid. I've watched this happen more times than I can count. Shame turns into avoidance. Avoidance turns into delay. Delay turns into decisions you didn't plan to make. Selling early, stopping contributions, starting over with something faster. And that's the trap. Because the system didn't fail, you just stepped away right before the curve had time to bend. Most people don't lose money because the market betrayed them. They lose it because the quiet years made them doubt the process. If you're still sitting there thinking about this, don't plan a whole strategy tonight. That's where people stall. Research mode, more articles, another video. Weeks pass, nothing changes. So here's something simpler. Within the next 48 hours, change one number. Just one. Increase the automatic transfer going into your investment account. Not something dramatic. 2%. Maybe 5%. Something small enough that you won't feel it when rent is due. Set it once, then close the app. Because motion matters more than perfection. You don't need the perfect portfolio this week. You need the machine to start running. Quietly. In the background. I keep thinking about that dinner table. The phone with the green chart. The moment where I sat there, nodding, trying to calculate how far behind I was. I don't think that question was the right one. Am I behind? Maybe the better one is simpler. Is the direction correct? Because benchmarks move, people start at different times. Different salaries, different mistakes. The timeline will never look fair. But direction you can control. So maybe the real question tonight isn't whether you started late. Maybe it's this. Did the system start running, or is it still waiting?